Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera. Here we are with episode 124 of Behind the Camera. As always, before we get into today's show, if you would like to support the podcast, you can follow me on all social media using the link in the description, which will take you to all platforms, and also includes a link to my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. You can get this in paperback, ebook, and free on Kindle Unlimited. I'm also on Patreon. For £3 a month, you will get access to more behind-the-scenes content, including an exclusive series where I catch up with old guests and much more. But now, getting into today's conversation. Today, I'm joined by author and publisher Terry Whalin. We sat down to talk his latest book, 10 Publishing Myths, a brilliant breakdown of the expectations many writers carry when they step into the craft. I read the book before our conversation, and Terry really shines a light on the traps and misconceptions that so many writers fall into. In this episode, we dig into those myths, the realities of traditional publishing, and a whole lot more. So now, here's the interview. Terry, welcome to Behind the Camera podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How are we doing today?
Great, Andy. Wonderful to be here with you.
Amazing stuff. Love to hear that. So, you are an author and you've worked within publishing and editing. You've worked in this industry for a while, most notably, obviously, recently writing 10 Publishing Myths. But before we get into talking about that, let's talk about a little bit about your background in this industry and sort of how you got into it and then what led you to writing 10 Publishing Myths.
It was basically in high school that an English teacher that I was turned in a paper noticed something in my writing and encouraged me to join the high school newspaper. And so I did that. They put me in the sports section, Andy, and I'm kind of a non-sports person. I mean, I don't know all the terms and all that kind of stuff. So I had to learn all that in order to be able to write sports stories. That's where I started. And then ultimately I became the editor of my high school newspaper. I decided that I really liked this stuff. And so I majored in journalism at Indiana University. I went there to study, and they have one of the top 10 journalism schools in the United States, and 30,000 kids on the main campus. And so I joined the college newspaper. I thought I was really a good writer. I learned very quickly that I had a lot to learn because my editor had me rewrite my first story about 5 times, and then it was like 2 little paragraphs, didn't even have my name on it. So I learned a lot while I was there at Indiana, writing stories and all that kind of thing. But about halfway through my sophomore year while I was there, this was in the pre-computer days, we were all sitting at our old Royal typewriters, and I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys. And so I kept muttering to myself, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde-haired girl that was sitting next to me, she turned to me and she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that about Jesus, because one of these days when you really need him, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what's this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. Andy, I had no really relationship with Jesus. And so she encouraged me to go to this little bookstore a couple blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and posters, and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a couple of days later, and I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And so I read this book, and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. But about that time, somebody invited me to this little Jesus people gathering in downtown Bloomington in a warehouse. People were sitting on little scraps of carpet, little candles lit. And those people in that room had something that I didn't have. And so I got a Bible. I changed the direction of my life. I thought I was going to be like a newspaper reporter at the Indianapolis Star, the Chicago Tribune, one of those kind of places. Instead, I joined this group called Wycliffe Bible Translators and worked in linguistics for 10 years. I went to Guatemala, Central America. I worked among the Southwest Cachiquel people, changed the whole direction of my life. But part of the reason that I'm in this business, Andy, is about books, is because books change people's lives. And I know that personally because here I read this little book as a sophomore in college, changed the direction of my life. And so I wandered back to my writing, started writing for magazines, and then in 1992, I went to a writers' conference and I met this editor there, and she said, "Terry, I've got a problem," and I always listen when these editors tell me that, and so she said, I'm at David C. Cook, and we're a part of our mission statement is that we want to show kids that there's a big world out there they can go to. What kind of ideas do you have? We don't have a single book in our whole line of children's book that talks about this. What kind of ideas do you have? And so I said, well, my kids were little at the time, and I was reading a lot of picture books to kids. And I knew that Steve Lawhead, who went by Stephen Lawhead for his fantasy work, had written a series of children's book called Howard Had. Howard had a hot air balloon, Howard had a spaceship, things like that. It combined real pictures with a little cartoon character. And so I said, what if we took our real pictures at Wycliffe from around the world that we work, combined them with a little cartoon character, and showed kids about different occupations? She said, oh, that's a really good idea. Write that up and send that to me. And so I made a little note and I wrote it up. And I mean, we had to go back and forth a lot before that actually became my first little book that was published in 1992, a little children's book called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus. And then since then, I've written more than 60 books for traditional publishers, and I've had great opportunities to do this kind of work in the publishing world.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. Like, and that's such a really, really great story. And I love the fact that it does take like just one book to change your life. And like, I am personally a big believer in that storytelling is everything. Storytelling is everything, and everything is storytelling. That is like I firmly believe that. And sometimes it can be how a story is told, how it's written, or maybe just something that you haven't heard that can really be like a massive influence, and it's like that's just really kind of testament to the true power of it. And you made an interesting point as well about when you started off as like a sports journalist but not being really into sports. So on a general level, if you like really enjoy that side of things, can you really just sort of put your narrative, your kind of talents in storytelling on like any kind of topic and be able to kind of run with it, even if you're not the biggest fan of it, like with sports, for example?
Oh yeah, you can very much so. That's part of the reason I've written more than a dozen books with other people, and I love that fact because you can sort of get into their heads and their stories and write that. In a number of years ago, Vanetta Flowers was the first African American ever to win a gold medal in the Winter Olympics in the United States, and she won in the 2002 bobsled that was in Salt Lake City. And so there was a publisher down in Birmingham, Alabama that contracted an African American journalist to write this book for her called Running on Ice. They were out selling the book, but they got a terrible manuscript from this author. And so they contracted me to write this book. I wrote it in 6 weeks for this publisher. And so I went down to Birmingham, Alabama, and met Vanetta Flowers. She did have an incredible story, but I wrote this book about what it was like to be a top track and field athlete, which she was, and she tried to go to the Sydney Games, but didn't make the U.S. team, and so she thought her career in track and field was all done. But they had this little card over at the hotel where she was. They were trying out women for the women's bobsled team of the United States. And the United States didn't have a women's bobsled team. The only thing they knew about bobsledding was they had seen the Disney movie Cool Runnings about the Jamaican bobsled team. So they knew about that.
Yeah.
But they barely even have snow in Birmingham, where Vanetta Flowers grew up. But she tried out for this bobsled team. And it turned out, because she competed in multiple track and field events throughout her college career, uh, she had the perfect body type to become one of the top bobsledders in the world. So she joined the bobsled team. They actually sent me to Salt Lake City. I rode the sled once. They have a ride in the summertime you can do. It's not as fast as on
Yeah.
ice, but it still scared the daylights out of me. But I had a chance to do that in order to be able to write this
That's
book.
amazing.
And the book got out there as a bobsled book that I wrote. But I was fascinated to get to learn her story and then be able to write her story into this book. So that's the kind of storytelling that you have the opportunity to do as a writer, get in other people's heads and write those kinds of experiences up.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, one thing I will say first is, as soon as you said bobsled team, immediately my mind also went to Cool Running. So yeah. but but yeah, I think as well, like, because it just shows that it really kind of, the surrounding sort of nature of things doesn't really matter as much as the it's the person's story is what, like, the kind of the more fascinating part about it. Like, so it could have been like, this person could have been a bobsledder, could have been anything else, but the story involved is kind of the incredible part of that, like the source material. So then, obviously, recently, you've written 10 publishing myths, and obviously over your time, as you mentioned, you've written over 60 books, and you've been published in over 50, written for over 50 magazines, and so you've spent a lot of time in this industry. So what was the light bulb moment for you to have to put out 10 publishing myths? Because obviously I think it's a very, very important book. I think it's something that a lot of writers, up and coming, even established, could really benefit from. But what was your light bulb moment for writing this book?
Yeah, I guess my light bulb moment, that's a great question, Andy, was really I talk to authors all the time. For the last 14 years, I've been an acquisitions editor for a New York publishing house, Morgan James Publishing. We publish around 150, 180 books a year. So I speak with a lot of authors and listen to their stories and their goals and their ideas and stuff. Uh, and what I find is that many of them have a completely unrealistic vision of what's going to happen with their book. I mean, I've been in publishing a long time, and I realize that there's a lot that I can't control in this process myself. I can do my part, but there's many things I can't do. I can't make a bookstore buy my book. I can't make a reader go into the bookstore buy the book. But um, so my light bulb moment with 10 publishing myths was really to try to help authors have more realistic expectations about what's going to happen with their book. And I had my own wake up moment, Andy, when it really comes to book publishing myself. I mean, I was a literary agent for a while. I had a little literary agency in Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona, that I was doing. And while I was doing that, Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, had this big event out in Los Angeles called Mega Book Marketing University in 2007. He invited me to come. At that point in my life, I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers. So uh, publishers make pretty books, they put them in the bookstore. But when you write for traditional publishers, sometimes once a year, maybe quarterly, they'll send you a financial statement
Mm-hmm.
to show how your books are doing, your royalty statement. Well, all of my royalty statements back then were in the minus category. I wasn't making any money on the books. And so I knew I must be doing something wrong. I just didn't know what I was doing wrong. So when I went out to Mega Book Marketing University, I took pitches from people throughout the event, but I also decided to sit there with 400 other people and listen and see if I could figure out what in the world I was doing wrong with my own book marketing. And one of the speakers there was the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, Jack Canfield. Now, Jack has this book that I have on my shelf called The Success Principles, where he's really studied what does it take to be successful in life and in business.
Yeah.
Well, the very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take 100%. We want somebody else to do it. We want some publisher, some marketing person, please, somebody other than us. But I realized how little I was personally doing to be telling people about my book. Sure, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I was doing almost nothing else to be telling people about my book. So I decided to change. I decided to take 100% responsibility for my own success. And blogging was new back then. So I started blogging. Well, being persistent and being consistent, Andy, are some of the real characteristics that every writer has to figure out how to do. So since I started my blog, I've been blogging every week. Well, I have over 1,800 entries in my blog, and so there's a lot of content over there. And I have this little thing that goes out online, searches for my name out there and if it finds it. Well, about a year and a half ago, I found this article that listed the top 27 content producers out there. Now, this article also said there were an estimated over 600 million blogs that are out there, but it listed the top 27 people. Well, I was one of the top 27 people. And it's not that I'm doing anything magical here. I'm just blogging every week about the writing life and being consistent. And so that's what I see that it really takes for people to really make a difference and find the success that they need with their book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, persistence and consistency, like that, even today, is still one of the most important things I think, in terms of any form of creation, because obviously we're in the digital age now. Everybody wants to be a content creator on social media. You have your Instagram and TikTok and that. And, and obviously with what I do, I kind of fall very much into that bracket, with the podcast. But even with the book that I wrote as well. And it's very much a case of if you don't take every possible step that you can to almost stay relevant, that's how harsh like the internet is. Like if you stop doing what you're doing, if you stop putting out your blogs, your posts, everything like that, it's like you, within no time at all, you become irrelevant. Even if you try to build it back up, you're building back up from not quite day one, but still quite low down from what you were. And like, I think consistency is something that, from very early on in terms of media, has been one of the most important things. Like, take radio shows on a schedule, TV shows, etc., etc. It all run on a schedule. People tuning in at the same time every single day, and that's sort of no different than writing a blog, doing a podcast, and getting those eyes on it, getting more eyes on it through word of mouth or just through general internet exposure now through algorithms. Yeah, it's like one of the most important things. And so to tie this into the publishing myths, like I read the book's a very, very, very good read. Like, is there a sort of aspect with authors, especially like first or second time authors, that they kind of feel that just writing the book and getting it published, that is the bulk of the work and that's where it kind of starts and finishes? Is that like an attitude that some people will take?
Oh, that's pretty much across the board. People believe almost like the Field of Dreams movie that Kevin Costner did. If you build it, they will come. So if you write a book and publish it, people will buy it. Well, that's not really true.
No,
I mean,
not at all.
it's so hard to get people's attention out there these days. We've pretty much proven that somebody has to hear about your book 7, 8, maybe a dozen times before they say, "Oh, 10 Publishing Myths. I should buy that book. I should read that book." There's a story that the Chicken Soup for the Soul guys told that many people have forgotten here, Andy. They were rejected about 160 times before they finally found the publisher to publish that first Chicken Soup for the Soul book. So they were really persistent in order to do that. When they would get rejected, Mark and Jack would look at each other and say a one word, they said to each other. They would say, next. Okay, this one didn't work out. Where's the next one? And so they were determined to find somebody. They finally found this little publisher in Florida, published the first Chicken Soup for the Soul book. Now, they told their publisher they were going to sell 1 million books in the first year. And their publisher laughed at them. They never sold 1 million copies of anything. They thought that was a ridiculous idea. It took them a year and a half to sell their first 1 million books. And these guys practiced what they call the rule of five. They got up every day and they did 5 things to be telling people about their book. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. I mean, my friend John Kramer, who wrote 1,001 Ways to Market and Sell Your Book, has a 700-page book of ideas. So they got that book and tried to do as many of those different ideas as they could, but they did them consistently over and over and over. And that's what really made the Chicken Soup for the Soul books take off and have the kind of momentum. So now that's one of the most, prolific series in the English language. I mean, it's incredible what's happened with that series.
That's amazing. Yeah. Like, and is it a case that like there is always going to be a publisher who will publish something? Obviously, there's going to be a certain level, but like, do authors sometimes give up a little bit too easily if, say, like a publisher they want, or like, maybe more prolific publishers won't accept their work?
Yeah, it's really hard these days to find the right fit out there. Traditional publishers are, they're having a higher and higher standard of the people that they're looking for, which means that the literary agents, most of these publishers won't look at your book unless it comes from a literary agent, and so the literary agents are struggling to find these people that they can bring to the publishers, and so really there's 3 different paths that people can take to get published. They can either go the traditional route, they can go the self-publishing route, which I've done that once. I don't really recommend the self-publishing route because they say that over the lifetime of the book, self-publishing, you're going to sell 100 to 200 copies. So that's not the kind of route that you really want to go, and you do it all yourself. And the third route is more the independent hybrid publishing route, like what we do at Morgan James. We were one of the first publishers that they used that term hybrid on, but we're distributing our books into 98% of the bookstores in North America, including the brick and mortar stores. So very broad distribution. I think that's one of the keys to getting published out there, as well as working with the right publisher. And so I'm always looking as an editor at Morgan James for the right kind of author to come on board with us, that we can get their book out there into the market and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know that self-publishing is a route that more and more people are taking, and like I get it's the sort of day that we live in now, where there are more and more writers these days, and we all have less and less money. And I think sometimes that's the easier way for people to do it. Like, I self-published my own book, and I completely agree. Like it is incredibly limiting in terms of its distribution, because if you self-publish through Amazon, then it basically can only be distributed through Amazon unless you, as the author, you sell it privately, but you still have to buy it from Amazon yourself.
Sure.
So like, you own the rights, but you have to buy that, you have to pay for the labor, and that's it's very easy. The profits, the cut is very, very poor, but I think it's just one of those things where it's easy to get your book out there, but again, it's sort of, you need to continue doing the work. You need to market yourself in doing that. You need to continually be pushing it, and also you need people to constantly be reviewing the book, because obviously Amazon being such a competitive marketplace, and it's very, very much based on reviews. The top rated reviews, they're always going to be at the top of the page. Like, and you self-publish a book, you have to rely on so many people, and The problem with doing that is, well, it's just that you have to rely on other people, and that is not always the easiest thing to do. And no harm to people, but it is the sort of the position that you put yourself in whenever you do self-publish, and that's something that I learned. Now, I didn't go in with high expectations that much, but I did. There was a lot of lessons I learned, and especially through reading and publishing myths, I was like, yep, notice this, notice this, notice this.
Well, and sometimes at Morgan James, we will take those self-published books and bring them into our system because Amazon is a big customer of Morgan James, but they're only 24% of our overall business.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I look at it, you publish with Amazon, you're really missing 76% of what we do for the book out there. So
Yeah.
like we distribute in the UK where you are, for example, and we sell in Australia and all over the world. I mean, that's one of the keys, I think, to getting your book out there successfully is getting it in as many places as possible at the end of the
day. Definitely, yeah. So what then is like the conversation like between an author or a literary agent and a publisher? Like what's the conversation that goes down between whenever an author is submitting their book for publishing?
Yeah, well, we're always looking at the author and the book. It's sort of it's a combination between the two because it's your content for one thing, what you're actually putting together, but it's also what are you going to be able to do as an author? What kind of connections do you have? What kind of online presence do you have? And it's not that we're looking for people that, I mean, if we find people that have big platforms, that's great. But we're really looking just to make sure that they have something started out there that we can help them develop and get it better. But that's part of the conversation between the author and the agent, or the author and the editor. And one of the reasons, out of my own frustration, Andy, I wrote this book called Book Proposals That Sell, 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. This book has over 150 five-star reviews out there. People have used it to get a $50,000 advance, to get an agent, to get a publisher. I wrote this book out of my own frustration because I realized that authors didn't really know how to pitch. They didn't really know how to put together the material for a book proposal. Book proposals they're hard to put together because you've got to focus on the reader. What are you going to do as the author? What are the competitive titles? A lot of information goes into this, but people can get this book from me for free if they go to bookproposals.ws for website, bookproposals.ws. And the reason we give this book away free, Andy, is we've learned at Morgan James that if you get that ebook from me, start to read that ebook, there's a high probability you're going to turn and buy the print copy of the book. So you don't lose anything as an author by giving that away. And we actually give those email addresses to our authors. So you can use those emails to build your list, but you can also drive print book sales by giving away a free ebook. So that's one of the things that we're doing at Morgan James, is an innovative thing. This 10 Publishing Myths book, I really want people to get this because I've set up a website. If they go to publishingoffer.com, you can get this book, particularly in the United States. You can get this book for me for only $10, along with the shipping, along with over $200 worth of free bonuses that I give related to this book. And these bonuses are not just, run-of-the-mill bonuses. One of my bonuses, for example, I interview a self-published author who sold thousands of copies of his book to some place that many authors never think about. It's to public libraries. Libraries have monies. They buy books. And so this author figured that out. He found the list of public libraries. He spent time every day calling a particular librarian that he would talk about in this tape, pitch this librarian on his book, and then she'd say, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll order that book." And so then after the call, he would pack it up, send an invoice along, and he sold lots of his books just doing that consistently. And so there's a lot of different ways to sell your book out there. You just have to find the right path for you at the end of the day to be able to achieve that.
Yeah, for sure. Like it really doesn't have to be that complicated. Like, it's amazing when, you find people who just kind of break the mold like that and they think outside the box, and then there they go. They've sold more copies than in their first month, say, than a lot of independent authors for sure. So when it comes to looking at a particular book, is there an element of, obviously we mentioned about, like, what is this, what are you going to do with this book? Like, are you, what's your platform like and everything like that? But is there also an element of, okay, one, why should we care about this book? Like, what is, what sort of, what have you put into this book? And then also the genre of the book as well, is that also factored into it?
Yeah, it is. The Whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whether it's a children's book, there's a lot of different kinds of books. So you have to find the right fit for your book. So, for example, at Morgan James, uh, we don't publish any books that have any profanity or
Mhm.
explicit sex in them. So, a number of authors, they send me their books, and they're full of that kind of stuff, and so I have to talk to them about that. And if they want to publish with us, then they have to eliminate those words and get rid of them. If not, that means we're not the right fit for their book. We're not the right place for them to publish that book. So it's all a matter of finding the right connection out there, and you can get those connections on LinkedIn or in writers groups or at a writers conference. I mean, finding the right person is a key part of the search that all of us are on to try to find the right place for our book.
Mhm. Absolutely, because something that I've heard a lot of people say before is that it's how much they would love to write something, but they just, yeah, and this is it's the same happens when it comes to podcasting too. But people would often say, I would love to write something and I know what I would like to write, but I don't think anybody would care about what it is that I have to write about, whether that be fiction or nonfiction. And like, do you get that a lot, from a publishing standpoint, where people are maybe a little bit hesitant in terms of what they've written because it might be like their first ever book or their first ever time reaching out to a publisher?
I don't get that a lot, but people want to get their stories out there, I guess is what I'd say at the end of the day. And so you got to tell a good story at the end of the day to really be able to do that. And don't bury your good stuff way inside the book, because that editor or agent may not get to very far in your manuscript if they don't see something on those first couple of pages that really
Yeah.
pull you into the story. The other thing, Andy, that I really encourage a lot of authors to do is uh, to write for print magazines out there. Many people forget about that. I mean, if your book sells 5,000 copies throughout the lifetime of the book, that'd be a good number for in the book publishing to sell books. In the periodical magazine area, it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people with your article, and they're short. They're like 1,000 words or 1,500 words. So look for those magazines. They're out there. They're all looking for personal experience stories. We all have strange personal experiences with our life. So write those stories down. Have a good beginning, middle, and end. Send those off. Read the guidelines. Read the articles of that publication before you submit to them. But they're looking for this kind of material. And so if it's great promotion for your book too, because at the end of your article, you can say, by Terry Whalin, author of 10 Publishing Myths. And so you've told people about your book, and it's another way to get your stuff out there. And also, if you write on a given topic different different articles, you can piece those together, and that can become chapters of your book. So it's all a matter of strategically looking at the writing that you're doing and seeing, okay, how can I get the greatest benefit for putting this stuff together and get it out there? And so I have friends that do that. They write magazine articles, they piece those magazines articles together, they become a book, and then they get their books out there. It's all a matter of just how you look at it in some
Yeah.
ways.
Wow. That's a really good bit of advice. Like, because like no, but I think today not many people would think about the likes of like magazines and sort of like, more widespread printed media, because obviously everything is digital, but like even if you're writing for a magazine, that still goes digital as well as printed. Like it's still going to be there in whatever platform that you allow it to be. So it's going to probably reach more eyes than you might think. Is if you're writing for a magazine, you might not be sure how many people are reading that on a weekly basis, but it could, but from what you're saying, it's guaranteed that it's going to be more people that might be buying the book from right from the first few weeks anyway. Like, and I think that's the sort of one of the things that I found, and I think I've interviewed like a lot of authors before as well, and obviously a lot more experienced. But like something that I've kind of gathered from other people I've spoke to before is that there's this idea that they're like, okay, within the first month when there's all this buzz and hype, I'm gonna sell X number of copies, and I mean, sometimes there might be, sometimes I think obviously it ultimately comes down to marketability. And from a personal standpoint, whenever I was close to releasing mine back in March, I put out to people on social media, like a couple of people had said to me about wanting a signed copy, and I was sitting thinking like, who the hell am I to be giving out signed copies of my book? Like, but okay, So I was just like, okay, if people are asking for it, I'll offer that to people. And but I had this in the back of my head for the entire time, and it was, so I think I sold maybe about 30 signed copies, but I literally like bought the author's copies and I did everything and sent them off myself. And the the cost that sort of had on the actual Amazon copies that were sold was, yeah, it was heavy. Like, I think, yeah, it was like a fraction of books that were sold, like, in the first like 2 months. And I was like, wow. And I did kind of expect that because I wanted to cap it at a certain amount, but then more people were asking, and I was like, okay, fine, that's okay. But you just kind of give up a little bit too easily. But yeah, like I think there's I think, do you think that as well, like with self-publishing, that sometimes people kind of go into it not really knowing what they're in for, in a sense, in terms of writing a book and
Oh
releasing
yeah,
a
I
book?
think I think a lot of people that self-publish really don't understand um, the importance of having a good cover, having a good editor to work on your book before you get it out there,
Yeah.
uh, writing the back cover copy, um, getting endorsements, getting somebody to write a blurb for your book or write a forward for your book. Uh, that all takes work, Andy, in order to be able to get those things together. But people buy books all the time because somebody endorsed the book or somebody wrote a forward. Like for my 10 Publishing Myths, I got Jerry B. Jenkins to write the forward for this book. Now, Jerry's a long-term friend of mine. He's been on the New York Times list 21 different times. And he writes about in this forward that he wrote a book years ago, over 20 years ago now, called Left Behind, that he wrote with Tim LaHaye. Uh, that series has sold over 63 million books and continues to this day to sell at least 10,000 copies a
Mhm.
month, which is incredible. Now, what he also writes about in this forward, that Left Behind was his 125th book.
Wow.
So he wasn't a new author when he wrote this. So that's what all of us are looking for. I mean, it was like winning the lottery, you know,
Yeah.
almost to have written a book like Left Behind that's still selling like that to this day. So that's the kind of stuff that people don't understand, you know, that are self-publishing. They don't understand all the work that's got to go into really producing an excellent book at the
Mhm.
end of the day. But I think the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out at the end of the day. Now you don't want this whole process to stymie you, so you don't want to submit it, you don't want to get it out there, but by the same token, you want it to really be excellent by the time you put it all together.
Yeah, definitely. And in saying that though, is there a sort of element where somebody could write an amazing book, self-publish it, but they miss out on so much return because they didn't go down the traditional publishing route?
That happens. That happens sometimes.
Hmm.
It does. It's rare, but it does happen where somebody self publishes and then uh, the book takes off and they get a traditional publishing deal after the fact.
Yeah.
That does happen a few times, but it's very rare for that kind of thing to happen. I mean, there's all these people that will pitch me their fantasy books, and they say they're going to be the next Harry Potter, for example. It's what they say. Well, do you really know the story of Harry Potter and what happened there? I mean, J.K. Rowling was a single mom, you know, and didn't have any money and wrote this book, and went to the library, you know, there in Scotland, looked up literary agents, and she saw this name, Christopher Little. She said, "Oh, that sounds like a children's agent. I'll send my book there." Well, uh, Chris Little was not a children's agent. He was actually an agent that handled thrillers, is what he did, a completely different type of genre. And he'd actually told his assistant, you know, just reject all this children's stuff. There's no money in children's books at all, is what he told his assistant. But this big black package came to their office, and the assistant was intrigued with this package, and so she took it home, read it, and she told him, she said, "Chris, I think there's something here you could sell." And so he did. He sold that first Harry Potter book to a UK publisher for like $1,000 advance. Well, that UK publisher sold that book to Scholastic for like $1 million advance, and Chris Little has been spending years of his life in children's books because of Harry Potter. So you know, those kind of happenstance things are out there, but they're pretty rare for that kind of thing to
Yeah.
actually happen.
No, of course, of course. And so then when it comes to publishing, is it very much a case where, as a publisher, you're taking a chance on this book, on this author, or is there also an element that you kind of, when you're reading it, that you can kind of sort of an educated guess on how well it might sell in terms of what you're reading, or is it very much a
It's
gamble?
all an educated guess on how it's
Yeah.
going to sell. There's big risk on each side. I think there's risk for the author and there's risk for the publisher. There's risk for the agent. We all have a big element of risk in this process because of the unpredictable nature of what's really going to happen out there with your book.
Yeah, no, it's so true. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow, never mind, in a month's time. So, just on 10 publishing myths as well, in the very end, you write about an 11th myth. And so the 11th myth is not actually published in the book, but there is a way to find it. So I just wanted to ask about the what was the sort of the rationale behind not but alluding to it in the book but not actually publishing it in the book?
Yeah. Thanks, Andy, for that question. Yeah. When Alice Kreider, who is an acquisitions editor at David C. Cook, sent me her endorsement, she told me, she said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, okay, Alice, I'll bite. What's the 11th myth? She said, well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah Winfrey, she'll book me on her show. And I'm like, well, I laughed, and it's like, yeah, that's a pretty good myth. And so what I decided to do when we were writing this book, when I was writing this book, I wrote that 11th chapter, and we designed it to look exactly like the rest of the book. And people can get that for free from me if they go to terrylinks.com/11th 11th myth. And the reason I do that is because sure, you can send your book to Oprah Winfrey if you want, but really, she has this big warehouse in Chicago where she organizes all this stuff that she gets, and then a couple times a year she gives it away to people. So your book can go in there with all that if you want, but I think there's a lot more productive things that you can do with your book than send a copy to Oprah Winfrey at the end of the day. And that's really part of what I did throughout 10 Publishing Myths. I really tried to give authors practical insights of things that they could do to really get their book out there and achieve the kind of success that they want to do. So every chapter has what I call a myth buster action. So it's something that they can actually do, because like I'll talk to authors all the time. They'll say, well, my audience is over on YouTube, or my audience is in LinkedIn. Well, those are good platforms, don't get me wrong. But within the business, we call those rented platforms, because I don't own YouTube or LinkedIn. As a matter of fact, I could violate their terms and get kicked off of those things tomorrow. So you want to build your stuff on your own website, your own blog, your own stuff that you can control, your own newsletter. Those are all things that you have control over. And that's the kind of practical advice that I try to give people in 10 Publishing Myths.
Yeah, and like it is all very valuable advice, because there is a lot of it where it highlights kind of how you just well there's the parts that highlight somewhat naivety of new writers as well, which I I wouldn't say is an insult, because I think a lot of people go into this thinking, well, Dan Brown did this, I can do this, and it's
Right,
obviously,
right.
quite the example, of course. But, and then also on the same vein, that a lot of writers are incredibly, harsh on themselves. And like, there's like a lot of like sort of self doubt, like, especially with the myth four, beginning writers have no chance to get published, which is so not true, because everybody starts somewhere. And like if you are an aspiring writer, or even have written books before, self-published, whatever, I would 100% recommend this book. Like, I genuinely would. And I appreciate you sending it to me ahead of time, Terry. I really do.
Well, glad to do that, Andy, because these books really do help people, and so I want to get it out there as broadly as possible. So hopefully your listeners will go to publishingoffer.com, get this book for only $10, and it'll be able to help them as well.
Absolutely. And on that note, Terry, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera. Thank you so much for such an amazing conversation, so insightful about the world of writing and publishing. Just one last note before we wrap up. Aside from 10 Publishing Myths, where can the listeners find you and your other works?
Yeah, one of the easiest ways for people to find me is just to go to X, Twitter. I have over 170,000 followers over there. Look at the different links that I have at the top there. I even have my personal email address, terry@terrywhalin.com, that's in my profile there, because I really do want to help people and allow them to, get access to me, but also encourage them as best I could, because we all need these books, because they really can change people's lives.
Absolutely. And there are so many people out there with a lot of self doubt who feel like they can't do this, and I think books like this certainly do help people really kind of see through the myths, see through the self-doubt, and just be able to go and get things done, or at least points them in the right direction. And sometimes that really does go the longest way. But once again, Terry, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Andy.
And there you have it for episode 124 of Behind the Camera. Huge thanks to Terry Whalin for being today's guest and for his insights into the world of publishing. You can check out 10 Publishing Myths via Terry's website and the link in the description. As always, thank you to all patrons for choosing to support the podcast via Patreon. It means the absolute world. And of course, if you would like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, check out my Linktree in the description for all socials and for my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. Thank you for listening, for the support, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.